Hello, everyone. It is Friday as I record this, so happy Friday. You probably won't be listening to this on Friday, but it's Friday somewhere. So we are doing something a little different this week, and so you're gonna have the opportunity just to listen to me talk. So good or bad, we'll see. Give us feedback if you like, this little break in the action. I'm just gonna focus on one topic. So it'll be a little shorter than normal, a topic that's really relevant to me right now as I'm coaching this summer, that has just been on my brain. So kind of cover this topic, and then next week you'll get the full crew of us again. So we'll kind of mix it up here. But I saw a tweet recently that I reshared. It was by Travis Snyder, who I believe is in sort of travel baseball doing some things. So you can go to my Twitter, Krista_Stoker, and kind of see I reshared this a while ago. But basically the conversation and the topic, which had already been on my brain in a couple different ways, was about whether your kid, so he's kind of speaking to parents in it, but whether your kid is ready for this more competitive travel ball experience and some of the things that really stand out in the current system that we have. I think, this is framed as mostly negative, but I think just opening some conversations around this topic. So I'm just going to kind of list the different topics that he brings up as part of competitive baseball. I certainly see this on the softball side. I think, from my own experience, as I now have young boys who are getting into sports, it's definitely something that weighs on me as I consider what they're going to participate in and what that's going to look like. So I'm just going to go through kind of a couple of the different topics and talk about it, obviously just from my perspective. So people can have different perspectives, but some things that I have seen on the softball side that relate to this. One is that parents in the current system feel more pressure at younger ages to push their kids into these experiences, these more competitive travel ball experiences, before their kid might actually be ready. I think this is so interesting because I think obviously to each of these topics, I think there are lots of layers. We could make it as simple as that's just, the parents are choosing that. They have FOMO, they have whatever, sort of maybe negative connotations to that. Or you can spin it that the system is monetizing kids earlier and that's why it's happening. There's lots of layers that you could spin. I think even just from my own experience and what I've seen happening at some of the really younger ages, these, 5 to 8 to 9, ages, when you're really like in the foundational stages of the game, is that there isn't much besides the structured thing. So it's so much different than, when I think even when I played and it was, there was such a big rec league, really minimal, a game a week or something, 2 games a week. There were these rec leagues that you could participate in that were not super serious. They were local teams. They were coached by parents. I'm sure people took them serious or there were issues with them from that standpoint, but there were a lot of opportunities to have things like that. There were opportunities because of the way that neighborhoods were built and the structure of that we would go to the park and play unstructured with each other. What I feel, just on my standpoint, speaking from a parent here, is that we have not put our sons yet into any sort of formal, what I would call we put them in formal sports, but more travel like level, nothing year round. Everything is very seasonal. But my son now is 8. And it definitely is harder and harder to find those opportunities, where it isn't year round, where it isn't super competitive. Sometimes because so many people choose that option, the sort of rec that is left is not a great experience for anyone. And I think on top of that, if my son wanted tomorrow to go out and play baseball, all of his friends are in formal structured things. So there's not a lot of opportunities for the kids to just go play. So what I think I feel, from my standpoint, just speaking from a parent, is that sometimes in these environments, it becomes so much weight on the parents to provide that atmosphere. I have to go outside and sort of create this unstructured environment. I have to find time to go to the park. I have to do all of these things to try to provide opportunities for them to be exposed to the sport, but that aren't in those formal opportunities. And that's lovely and something I really want to do. But just, time is different. You can't just go send them out with their friends if you have time constraints that don't allow you to be the one that's going out and partaking in that. So I think with all of these things, there's nuances to it. I don't think it's calling sort of anyone out for anything. I think, there's a lot of pressure on parents to try to create that. There's difference in the way that we sort of send our kids out to play in the neighborhood. There's certainly much more structure at younger ages for what it looks like. And so I think, my son right now is doing a sort of rec. Both sons are doing rec hockey. And I think like, okay, well, I'd like them to get more work. I'd like them to continue to be a little better. If this doesn't feel like enough exposure to this, what are the alternatives? And a lot of times you turn to structured things, really high structured things, because it doesn't feel like there's those opportunities for free play. And I think that that's, really important, something that's hard in softball. Even in the 10 years that I've been coaching in the sort of, I guess it's been more than 10 years at this point, but, 10, 15 years that I've been coaching in the Chicago area, you see this participation at the younger ages sort of decreasing because more and more people are just having to play, travel ball really early, and not everyone can do that. There's not a lot of opportunities for them to stay in a sort of rec space. There's not a lot of opportunities for them to do more unstructured things. So I definitely think I can see why parents fall into this idea that they need to enter this heavy, competitive, structured, softball so early, because it feels like the only thing that's really out there. And so I think there's this, probably if we find this to be something important to change, there's this combination of parents have to want it and kind of demand it and help build it and support it. And then we have to put some real thought into what the structure of that would look like, how we would do that in the current system. Because obviously, I think Devin from Driveline always says this, like, you can't take the toothpaste out of the tube at this point. We've sort of or can't put the toothpaste back into the tube at this point. We've sort of already gone down this route with the current system. And so I think we'd have to be creative inside the system of how we could do it. What I will say, back to the sort of hockey league that my son's in, he's in they switch, I don't know much about hockey, so I don't know if you'll know much about hockey, but they switch lines every minute. There's no coaches. The kids are just playing, every minute it buzzes, the kids go on. It's super unstructured. And so, I think that there are ways kind of in a more structured environment that people are finding these opportunities to create something that feels less pressure, that feels like less structure. But I definitely can see that and see how it maybe negatively impacts kids, or it pushes parents and families to put kids into spaces that they aren't ready for, don't want maybe that pressure, don't want that structure, because it just feels like maybe there aren't other opportunities. The other thing, and I think this is really related, is, his second point was that it feels like we've lost this idea that playing a sport with your kid at the park or in the backyard is as valuable as the structured play. And I just think that goes back to kind of what we said. I definitely feel that. I think it doesn't feel as like you're getting as much accomplished if you go to the park and play than all of these structured things that you could be in, the extra practices with independent coaches, the sort of work that the kids could be doing. And I think that just comes down to everyone's in that structure. We've privatized instruction so much. We've gotten opportunities, and in many cases that's amazing, and it's advanced the game at the higher levels. And it's helped us get to the root of things and help really make people get better. But at the younger ages, when we do it too early, we value that over this free play. And what I will say is, as someone who now coaches 18U, I have to find times inside practice to create unstructured environments, to create what I would call like free play. It's not totally, go in the backyard and play, but we create scenarios in practice, a rundown scenario that's not super structured, that we sort of like put them into a full pace thing and then let it happen. We let them work through it. We let them roll with it, because what I find at the older ages is when we haven't been exposed to that sort of unstructured play, when we haven't been in the park trying to throw sidearm, imagining we're, Sis Bates out there at short, imagining we're making this big play, when we haven't had this opportunity for free play and they've only had these really structured environments, by the time they get up the system, when things don't go exactly the way that they think they're going to go in the game, or when they aren't told every scenario, we lose the imagination that is required to be a good softball player. I have to have, when we see the crazy plays where someone fakes someone out or knows, something to do. I think I saw one where like they almost pretended to catch it or sort of delayed in catching it so that the person on the tag went at the wrong time. When we see things like that, that comes from an imagination that free play in some way is what allows that. And if everything I do is like a line drill, is super structured, this is exactly how we field a grounder. This is what our footwork looks in this exact scenario. This is the play on first and thirds. This is exactly how rundowns look like. If everything we do is in that structured environment, we lose that. And it's so important. I really feel like at 18U, what I am doing the most is trying to get that back, is trying to start to instill creativity and sort of scrappiness and more of that, feeling of just like read the play, see what's around you, absorb what's around you, and really go with that instead of waiting for someone to tell you exactly what to do. So I would say at younger ages, the free play, it has to start getting valued over that structured play, because it certainly is something we see at the older ages. I see this, I hear college coaches say this, so I don't think this is me in a vacuum, where they just, they don't have a feel for the game. And the feel for the game comes from being able to just really have some freedom to explore different things and some imagination. And so I think that that's such a good point. And I think it's something that we should really value. The other thing that he brings up here is that we overlook the amount of pressure and fear that kids experience at a young age when they play in front of crowds with parents cheering or complaining about the umpires. I'll give an example of a game. So this was a 16U game. So this is not super young. I mean, it's definitely young, still kids, but we're not talking like 10U here. But it was game 1 or 2 in bracket play, single elim, but beginning of the summer tournament. This isn't like the national championship. This is, if you did win it, great, but it doesn't mean a whole lot. This tournament didn't mean a whole lot to win. And I was, between games. So we were kind of sitting in the background, or I was just sitting in the background on the phone, kind of overlooking. I had to step away because it got so loud. And I remember just being almost taken aback by, there's some level where you kind of walk up to an environment and you think like, oh, this is awesome. Everyone is really into it. But then there's some level where you think, why is everyone so into it? So there was, a call that wasn't good. It was an umpire in a kids tournament. It wasn't a good call. But you had parents standing, screaming at the umpire, telling them that was terrible. That was the worst call. Like, you're horrible. Screaming things like that at the umpire. You had, when things were scoring and going well, like so much excitement from the fans. Like, it sounded like you were at a professional game from such excitement. And I think as an observer, there's times where you could think that that's really awesome. But I think sometimes I step back and think, there's a lot of pressure on these kids, right? That this game, which is meaningless, has the crowd and the adults so invested. There was a moment where an athlete didn't get a bunt down or something, and the coach from the third base dugout just screamed at them, and then looked at the they were on the first base side, looked over at the first base side, and it was at extra innings. This was a high intensity game, but screamed at the crowd like, let's go, get your energy up, really was getting into it. And I think when you take a step back and yes, this is amazing that we're all so into this, you could think of it that way, but you also just see it through the kids' eyes of how intense that must feel for them, how heavy that game, how heavy and important that game is being articulated to them to be. And I think that that's, just a really important thing for us to think about from a pressure standpoint. Calling all pitchers and pitching coaches, PitchDoc 2024 is your destination for revolutionary pitching education and information, from the newest technology to advances in biomechanics knowledge to take-home strategies and application for making your pitchers better today. Join us August 8th and 9th at the Westin O'Hare in Chicago. Experience transformative sessions led by leaders from the college game to technology companies to player development experts. Use promo code OGX Podcast to take an extra 10% off. Visit go.ogxsoftball.com/pitchdoc. Again, visit go.ogxsoftball.com/pitchdoc and use code OGX Podcast to take an additional 10% off. Spots are limited, so secure yours today. I see this so often where kids are internalizing that pressure. Last weekend we were playing in a tournament and I felt like our kids just weren't playing free. They seemed timid, scared to make mistakes, and I got a little frustrated with them. And my message during the game was, where is this pressure coming from? I'm not putting this pressure on you. Like, I don't feel this pressure. I'm not going to scream at you if you make a mistake. Like, I'm not feeling this pressure. Where is this pressure coming from? And I was feeling so frustrated. And then we kind of got to the end of the game and I realized, as I was watching, I had almost instilled pressure on them by saying, like, you shouldn't be feeling pressure. It's like a mom disappointment factor of, this environment it's filled with pressure. I have a couple of uncommitted kids on my team. There's a lot of pressure that is being put on them about what's that going to look like when you're going to find out where you're going. I hear parents all the time say, like, it will be fine once we're done with recruiting, then we'll be able to relax. So that puts pressure on them. It's high competition. So there's this feeling of like wanting to win every game, and that puts pressure on them. And then me, I was like, well, you shouldn't be feeling pressure. Why are you feeling pressure? So what I had to deliver after the game was, from my standpoint as a coach, anytime I'm sort of stressed about my athletes, it's just about them as women, as young women and sort of any struggles they're facing. I'm not losing sleep about the error that someone made. Obviously, we're trying to continue to get better. And we're going to talk about some of the challenges we're having from fundamentals and physical perspective. But, the game and the environment we're putting in, it does have pressure. And it's not to say let's remove all that pressure, but, thinking about the ages that kids are going into that pressure, that they're feeling it, even when, we're like, well, the stakes aren't so high, but we're acting like the stakes are really high. I think sometimes I feel pressure of, we do it a little different. I coach a little different. So then I feel the pressure of, I want to prove that works. And then that, that pressure gets put onto the kid. So I think just, it's important for us as adults to kind of observe that, to understand that it's there, to not brush it away and tell them that they shouldn't be feeling it, but also to really think about, does my kid even want this pressure? Is she having success in this pressure? If she's having sort of like some mental struggles, is that only softball that's bringing that out? So, is this a good choice that we're putting her in? I think just really being open to kind of considering some of those things is really important. The next thing was, the focus has become narrowed to the child's performance and compared to other kids instead of how the child is actually feeling throughout this experience. I think this one is just so hard as a parent. Like, I totally get that, where this comes from. And as a coach, you're focused on the performance, but really stepping out of that, sometimes I'll ask my sons, how do you feel like you did? And I think they didn't do great, or they didn't really, try that hard. And they're like, I did great. I touched the puck today, or I kicked a pass today. And I think just letting them have that experience is so important for us. I think, sometimes a kid either felt really good in the game and had fun and isn't so worried about their performance, or they're really already struggling with their performance, and then we hyper focus on it. I think just trying to ask how the kid is feeling about it. Are they enjoying themselves, right? And that's the first question we have to be asking all the time. Are you enjoying yourself? Even on days where it's hard and we feel crappy, at the end of the day, do you still choose this game and you're having fun with it? And just being able to get to that and not just thinking always about the next thing. We have 10 parents and coaches focused on how those kids are going to, go to Oklahoma one day and play professionally one day. But it's, we got a long route before that. And that's probably not what we should be focused on. So hyper focusing on performance right now and not how the kid is experiencing it, how they are feeling, how it's impacting them. we have so many athletes that come to us late in their career, and it's not that they don't want to play anymore, but they have a lot of emotions around the game. It wasn't smooth for them. They didn't have these great experiences, and it's not just about performance, but they had a lot of pressure. They were super focused on just performance and recruiting, and now they're kind of reflecting on all of that, and maybe it didn't go the way they thought. So I think being able to really hear what our children's experiences are through it, I think is so important, and it's important for our relationships with them. This last one is we lose sight of how our emotions as parents, but I think when I hear parents, I think just adults, because I think you can say, coaches or umpires, even really any of the adults involved. But we lose sight of how our emotions can take over and effectively ruin our kids' chances to experience the game on their own terms. I think that just goes back to the one we talked about before, which is, I think of a experience where, let's say, a pitcher doesn't throw well, and that girl has an experience of that game on her own, whether it's that was a good pitch and I missed it, or I threw a good pitch and she just hit it anyways, or I was tired and that's a bummer, but I got hit, or man, I didn't throw great that game, and I want to kind of explore that. And so the opportunity to sit in the emotion that they need to on their own, and sort of have that opportunity to just have their own experience of what that feels like. I think same with like the joy of it, the positives, is just letting them have the opportunity to experience that. I think it's important in life, but it's certainly important in games. And I definitely, have to work really hard on, as a coach, to not overtake the environment in the game, and I think obviously you're there to try to motivate when you need to. And so there are times where you might step in, or maybe you do kind of want to sway, the emotions or the experience a little bit to try to get something out of the athletes. But I think more often than not, deferring and just really trying to teach them to kind of have their own experience of the game is so important. I think especially for young women, the more we can teach them autonomy through these things and not try to control their emotions around it, I think is so important. This last thing is, this person writing this obviously is in charge of kind of creating his own team and league, and it's really, about that. So he says many parents, coaches, team, and league officials have been sucked into the vortex that more money, more practice, and more games are going to solve the problem. And I get it. I think that's what I was kind of saying is I think this concept it's layered. There's not one thing. I had a athlete last weekend. We had a game and she didn't throw her best. She's a pitcher. She didn't throw her best. And I don't know, I didn't read that much into it. The environment's not always easy for these athletes just come out and they're kids. And also it's hard to come out and throw your very best, every single day in the environment that we created. The other coach knew us and knew her and asked me if her velo was down. And I was like, probably. And then the next day I asked that athlete what time she had gotten in the day before the game. And she had gotten in at 1 a.m. She had to drive to our tournament, which was a decent drive. And I just think, let's not read into every single thing, and let's know that this environment that we've put them in, it's set up a little bit for them to fail. There's many benefits and amazing positives to it. We played on beautiful fields. We played against great competition. There were lots of college coaches there, but we also had to travel really far to get there. We had to try to turn around and perform. We had to, play 7 games in 3 days. There were a lot of things that are set up not great for them. And I think as the adults in it, it's, our opportunity always to step back and think, okay, is this environment, does it have enough flaws that we should try to fix it? Are there things that we should improve for our athletes? Because at the end of the day, this is about our athletes. So are there things that we can try to improve and should try to improve? Or is it not ideal, but it has a lot of pros? And so should we acknowledge the not ideal parts and make sure that our athletes are also acknowledging that? And I think those combination of things, if we keep asking those questions, and then I think we'll keep progressing things where we need to. We'll get the adults thinking about things in the right light instead of sort of leading with our emotions and our experience as the adults in it, instead leading with the athletes' emotions and the athletes' experience, and just continuing to try to build a system that is better and better for them as we continue to go on. So I loved the tweet. Go give it a follow, kind of get involved in the conversation. Feel free, like I said, to go on my Twitter when I see things like that. I try to share them. Happy to have conversations. Might be setting myself up here, inviting people to that, but happy to have conversations about things like that on there. I'm always interested, not because I think, I'm very much in the system and love the game and love to give kids these opportunities and love to continue to grow and expose our game, which I think is amazing. But I think, we're the adults and we should always be asking, have we created a system that's really in the best interest of the athletes playing it? And if there are any parts of it where the answer might be no to that, then we got to do some conversations, as parents, as coaches, as the people in charge of the tournaments, as the people in charge of the facilities and the organizations, of just what we might continue to do together to make this game even more beneficial and to get more young girls playing it. So that's all for today. Again, a little different today. You got to just listen to me. So if you're sick of my voice, do not fear. Next week, we'll be the three of us again, chatting on, putting it all out there as we always do about a few different topics. So until next week.